All right, going to do a little video here to show off this new Swiftpoint Z2 mouse. I'm going to attempt to explain kind of how the button mappings work, what kind of cool things this mouse does, and explain how I've set it up for what I like in a shooter game like this one here, which is Gray Zone Warefare. So Gray Zone Warfare has, it's kind of a milsim type game, so it has a lot of different things you need to do, holding your breath, checking your ammo, checking your gun, adjusting your zeroing on your scope. It's kind of a slower moving game, and as opposed to some games where just a lightweight click and shoot type game, a more simple mouse is fine. But games like this, games like Tarkov, where you've got a lot going on and having to either reach around on your keyboard to do things, or in my case, I do use a gaming pad, so that makes it nice for me. I have a bunch of thumb buttons I can use, and a bit better usability. But even then, I like to have more things I can do on my right hand while I'm focusing on moving. So if you need to move and reload or move and do different things, you can do that very easily. So I've always been a fan of mice that have a lot of buttons on them, but the problem is a lot of times the buttons are in like weird to reach places, like you have to reach really far forward with your thumb, and or you've got buttons back here and you have to like come back and try to push. They did a fantastic job with this mouse of keeping everything within a spot that's easy to reach. So there's only actually 2 thumb buttons, because your thumb can't really go very far realistically while maintaining control of the mouse. So you've just got kind of a lower and an upper. And in my case, I map those to my zeroing. So I can zero down or zero up my weapon, and you'll see that change up there. So I think that's really handy, because again, a game like this, a lot of times as you're moving slow, you might be zeroed out at farther ranges looking for people, but as you start getting closer and closer to where you might find enemies up close, you zero down, so that's handy. Another thing about this game, let's just talking about the basics, obviously point and shoot. So some games allow you to have separate button mappings for holding ADS or and toggle ADS. This game in particular only allows you to choose one or the other. Either you can ADS while you're holding the mouse, or you can choose it to where you click and it'll hold the ADS and then you click again to let go. In my case, I like to do both sometimes. If I'm just moving around and I'm trying to like quickly pick up targets, I might just want to click, and only have it holding ADS while I'm clicked. In other cases, if I'm gonna like hold an angle or something or be sniping, I may not want that. So with the mapping of the software, you can do what's called deep clicks. A deep click means you push the button harder. There's pressure sensitive buttons on this mouse, and that includes your right trigger, your left mouse button, your right mouse button. Also, these 2 fingertip buttons here, what they call fingertip buttons, those are pressure sensitive, and even your mouse wheel button is pressure sensitive. So any of those can be mapped to different levels of press, and you can control all that in the software, and you can have multiple stages of pressing. So you press a little bit for something, press deeper for something else, and press deeper for another thing, and so on. There's only so much range you have with the click, so you realistically you can't do 10 things through a click, but you can certainly do 1, if not 2 in some cases. I've personally found that just doing a primary thing and a secondary thing seems to work pretty well. The other cool thing about deep clicks is if you've got buttons you may not want to bump, like let's say a reload button, you can have it set up so that just clicking it doesn't necessarily trigger the action. You have to push down through hard to get it to happen. So for example, I have my reload here on my fingertip button. You can hear if I just click it, nothing happens. If I push it hard, then I reload. So that prevents accidental reloads if I'm trying to move around click, but gives me a button that I can hit easily right there. This mouse also has haptic feedback, so you can trigger that at different levels and at different conditions. So like for example, when I click the reload button, if I don't press it hard enough to get a reload to happen, it doesn't vibrate. But if I do push it down hard enough, I get a vibrate, which is nice. Going back to ADSing, so as I mentioned, sometimes you want to just click and hold the ADS. I have my right mouse button set up to where if I deep click it, it'll vibrate and it'll hold ADS for me. So you can see I'm ADS'd in the game, but I'm not holding the button anymore. Essentially what that's doing in the software is it's just continually holding down right mouse button for me in a loop. And then to break the loop, I simply a click of the right mouse button again, the first action it does is break any loops. So I just click again and I'm out of that loop and I'm back to just regular, click to ADS. So that's kind of handy there. Another function in this game that's very important is holding your breath. So when you're zoomed in, you can see how much my scope's moving around. And if I want to, really get in on someone and, get a headshot or something, it's important to hold the scope steady. So that's where holding your breath comes in. Now I've done a couple different ways of holding my breath, kind of depending on the situation here. So you got these knuckle buttons, as I'll call them, that you press down with the, first section of your fingers. You've got one on each side. They also have a pull function, which is kind of cool, and I'll explain what I'm doing with those. I mapped my right mouse knuckle click to hold my breath whenever I'm clicking it. And I also get a vibrate whenever I've triggered it, so I know I've triggered it. So for example, I will press hard, hold, now I'll click this knuckle button, and now I'm holding my breath. Now there's a time limit to holding your breath before your guy, has to let out his breath and stops happening. But I can, using that button, kind of scan around for targets and hold breath and, take a shot. Another thing I like to do sometimes, if I come out of here, is I see a guy fairly off in the distance. I know exactly where he's at. I know that I want to hold ADS, hold my breath, and take a shot. So what I've done is I've mapped this right fingertip button here to do all those things. So when I push this button down hard enough, it will vibrate to let me know. It will automatically hold the right mouse button for me, so it'll hold ADS, and it will start holding my breath all in one and doing it in a loop until I either tap the button again or tap right mouse button, because either one of those can break the loop. So I'll show you right here. So if I just hard press the fingertip button on this right side, get a vibrate, now I'm holding my breath automatically, not having to touch anything, and pick out my target, take my shot, and then either fingertip button to release or right mouse button to release. So different ways of doing things depending on the context, the situation, in terms of aiming and holding my breath, all controlled by my right click side, essentially, is how I'm doing that. While I'm over here, my pullback button on here, what that does is a weapon check. So I'll show that here. So when you click that back, it's going to check the chamber, it's going to pull the magazine, it's going to tell you how many bullets are in it, it's also going to tell you what your zeroing's at. So that can be kind of handy if you've been fighting around and you're not sure, where you're at on things. You can do that. Also, this game and Tarkov, for example, have a mechanic where sometimes your gun can jam or have a problem and not fire, and you're required to check your gun to deal with it. So having that action somewhere on your mouse where you can get to it rather than having to figure out where that button is or take your hand off your movement keys allows you to, if you're getting shot at, run for cover while you fix your gun and then get back into the fight. So that's a nice handy button to have there. So over on my other side, as I mentioned, just simply left trigger is shoot. There's really not much else to do with that. You could perhaps set it up to where a deep click would automatically be clicking for you. So a single fire gun could be programmed to just loop fire for you, kind of like an automatic mode, essentially, if you want to do that. I don't really have a need for that. As I mentioned, my other fingertip button, that's my reload button there. And then this knuckle button here on my index finger, that's how I cant my sight. So ADS, if I want to look down the barrel, for example, and shoot close range, because this ACOG kind of sucks up close, if I need to clear a room, I can hit my knuckle button and do my cant. And again, I get a vibrate when that happens. So even if I'm out of ADS and I trigger my cant, I can feel that, and I know that when I come up for ADS, I'm going to be canted, or I can switch it back pretty easily. So that's what I'm doing there. My pullback on here is an ammo check. Again, this is one of those games where it doesn't have magical refilling of magazines like Call of Duty. You have to keep track of how many rounds you still have in your magazine, and you need to reload appropriately at times and repack magazines. So if you've been shooting some enemies and you kind of lost track of, you know, how much you've been shooting, if you need to reload or not, rather than wasting a reload and having to stop and do a repack, it's nice to have a button that you can pull back like this one and does a quick ammo check and tells you how much rounds you have left. And then if you're low, you know, I click down hard, do a reload. So, and then finally, how I'm using these two buttons right here, my front button is my select fire mode. I have it set up to where in the game you have to hold select fire in order to change the fire mode. Just pushing it will check. So if I just click this, and again, this is a very easy reach. Another thing I like about this mouse is that, you know, for your index finger, these two buttons are very easy to reach and very easy to feel. You can even just push over and knock them this way or push them on top. If I click that one time, you'll see it checks my fire mode and tells me what fire mode I'm in. Again, sometimes in this game, you want to be single fire when you're plinking targets, or you want to switch to automatic if you're going to clear a room. So being able to do a quick check and see what you're at is handy. If I hold it, then it switches. So that's how that works. And then my other button here is my tactical device button. So if I hit that button and I have a tactical, you know, laser or something selected, it'll come on. Now, in order to set those up in this game, you do have to go in and turn them on. So holding that button down will bring up my tactical menu. Then I've mapped my mouse button to be, you know, function like an F key, so I can turn on my light. Now, click out of this menu, and now you'll see my tactical button turns my flashlight on or off, or if I had a laser, it would turn that on or off. So that's everything here that I'm doing with my mouse. One thing I always forget to mention that's also very cool that I do is you'll notice that when I'm zoomed in, my sensitivity, which is basically your DPI, is pretty high. You'll notice that when I hold my breath button, it really slows down. Let go of the breath button, it speeds back up. That's not a function of the game, that's actually a function of the mouse I programmed in. So you can program in a change of DPI. In other words, you can program the mouse to be less sensitive when certain buttons are held or when you're in a certain loop. So I find that helpful to where when I'm holding my breath, I want to lower the DPI to make my mouse less sensitive, to make it a lot easier to hold on a target. Some games do allow you to, you know, basically adjust your sensitivity when you're scoped in at certain different ranges or certain different scopes. Sometimes you can do that through game settings. This game, you cannot do that. So I find that helpful to where I lower my mouse sensitivity, and then as soon as I let go of the button, I'm back to regular sensitivity. And that also counts if I am using my automatic hold breath. My sensitivity is lower here until I click out, and now I'm back to normal. So that's kind of handy. And then the other final thing that this mouse does that's pretty cool is it has the ability to tip and rock side to side. In a lot of these games where you lean, there's a lean function to peek around corners. Some people are really good at, you know, a lot of times those get mapped to Q and E. Some people are good at putting two fingers on one key, or they'll flip the Q and the E, and so, you know, when they're trying to move one way, they can reach up and lean the other. For me, I could just never master that mechanic. I just didn't work for me. I've always relied on thumb buttons. So a lot of times I would have like a mouse thumb button would be to lean to my lean to my right. And like a thumb button over here on my gamepad would lean the other way. That kind of felt natural, you know, right hand, left hand. Or my last mouse had a toggle up and down, so I was using that for lean, but I was finding that pretty awkward to try to hold a lean. Well, the cool thing with this mouse is you can program it to where when you tip the mouse, you can toggle your lean. Now, as you can see here, I'm not just leaning randomly. Now, if I reach up and I hit Q and E, you can see that it's possible to lean, like while you're trying to move, you might accidentally lean and slow down. So you wouldn't want that necessarily to just happen all the time. So rather than programming it directly into the tilt, I have it programmed to where you have to be in ADS, and now when I tip the mouse, now I lean. So to me, that feels really natural if I'm, you know, coming around ADS and then I want to kind of peek around this corner, it's easy for me to hold that lean by tipping my mouse or come out of it, but only while I'm holding my ADS button. Even if I am locked in there and I'm kind of moving around like this, you see I'm not triggering the lean because I don't want to slow down while I'm trying to like move up on a target or something. But if I do click my mouse, now I've got my leaning back. So I did tie it together like that. Again, one of the many things you can do with this mouse. So yeah, overall, the functionality, the ergonomics, and the programmability of this thing is like nothing I've ever seen. And I'm quite a mouse nerd. Again, I'm a big fan of doing a lot of things on my mouse. I find it very convenient to be able to just really focus on movement with my right hand and do things like checking ammo, you know, reloading, changing my fire mode without having to take my left hand off of my primary movement keys. You know, I like to just use that for movement. Still, you know, I still use it for like my sprinting and my crouching and any other, you know, character type movements. I like that on my keyboard or my gamepad, but I like to do a lot more things with my gun on my mouse, and this allows that to work very well. So only really downside to this mouse is it's kind of heavy. You know, if you're a lightweight mouse person that likes that ability to flick a mouse around, you know, that can make that kind of hard for you. You might not, you know, it might take some getting used to being a heavier mouse, but in games like this where, you know, strategy is more important in my opinion than lightweight, you know, click on everybody's head as fast as you can that's running around, you know, I think the value of this mouse is there for sure, and it works very well for these games. So anywho, that's my review of this mouse and what I think of it. So hope you guys enjoy.